Around 1905, Lotikiyateda, also recorded as Komasita, daughter of the chief of Laguna, wore Kawaik clothing with a belt and bead necklaces. Kawaik is what the Querés people call Laguna. The Laguna Pueblo community is located in west-central New Mexico, about 45 miles west of Albuquerque, on lands connected to the San Jose River. In 1908 in Panama, Minnesota, an Ojibwe woman is portrayed in a quiet moment by the edge of Red Lake in northern USA. The author, Roland W. Reed, followed the pictorialist school. He staged scenes to record ways of life threatened by reservations and assimilation policies in the early 20th century. Around 1900 in a Hopi village in Arizona, two girls lean on an adobe window. The scene, recorded by Carl N. Wernz, captures a pause in daily life on the mesas. Silent curiosity, desert light, and the outside world changing fast with railroads, missions, and government schools. In 1878, at Fort Keogh in the Montana Territory, a Cheyenne woman faces a turning point. Part of her people tries to return north after forced removal in the Great Sioux War. The Northern Cheyenne, led by Little Wolf and Dull Knife, seek to reclaim the plains while the Army consolidates the post in the Yellowstone Valley. In the early 1900s in Isleta Pueblo, New Mexico, Carlotta Chiwiwi is with her daughters, Maria and Felicita Tura. In a studio, they display everyday clothing and utensils while posing for H.S. Poley, a photographer from Colorado Springs active between 1900 and 1920. The scene connects the practices of the Tiwa people to the external gaze in a changing Southwest. In the early 20th century, Hopi girls from Sycomovi on First Mesa, Arizona, appear in ceremonial dresses and with side-rolled hairstyles known as butterfly whirls, a sign that they were unmarried. In villages atop the mesa, the scene was recorded by Frederick Thirst Monsen, who traveled through Walpi, Sycomovi, and Hano, documenting daily life. In 1895, a young woman from Taos Pueblo, New Mexico, crosses a courtyard of stacked adobe houses, with leaning ladders and clay ovens nearby. The village, inhabited for centuries and now a World Heritage Site, lies along the Rio Pueblo de Taos. Between chores, she walks through a history that spans empires, borders, and passing fashions. In 1892, a young Kiowa woman lives through the reservation era in the Oklahoma Territory. After the Medicine Lodge Treaty, 1867, her community faces the pressure of schools and the land division of the Dawes Act. Her clothing and posture signal tradition amid change, holding on to culture while the government redefines daily life. In 1897, a Spokane woman poses by the river that sustained her people for millennia, on lands now in eastern Washington. Her clothing and posture speak of a time when salmon fishing and gathering marked the seasons. As cities grew, Frank LaRoche recorded indigenous lives in transition, under the pressures of reservations and dams. Around 1904, a Pueblo woman holds ears of corn, a symbol of the cycle that sustains villages in New Mexico. Corn is food, calendar, and faith. It is planted with rituals, thanked for at harvest. And the Corn Mother reminds that the community exists because the land nourishes. Scene recorded by Carl E. Moon. It shows the bond between planting and rain. In the early 20th century, Carl Everton Moon traveled through Arizona and New Mexico. From 1907 to 1914, hired by the Fred Harvey Company and the Santa Fe Railroad, he photographed the Hopi, Navajo, and various pueblos. He sought to preserve daily life and rituals before federal policies and the white market reshaped these cultures at a rapid pace. 1880s, northern New Mexico. A Taos Pueblo woman poses beside the multi-story adobe houses of a community inhabited for centuries. Her wool dress falls from the shoulders with a shawl and belts for daily use. The image captures a moment between tradition and change, when the U.S. was already surrounding the Pueblo with new laws, trade, and curious photographers. In the 1880s, Marcia Pascal, a young woman of Cherokee origin, grew up between two borders, the Cherokee Nation and the rapidly changing United States. Daughter of Lieutenant Colonel George W. Paschal, she lived through the railroad expansion and the policies that reshaped indigenous lands, such as those that would culminate in the Dawes Act, shaping identities and destinies. In 1894, A Kiowa woman lived in the Kiowa Comanche Apache Reservation in the Oklahoma Territory. The government was pushing the division of lands after the Dawes Act and the Jerome Agreement. Amid ration lines, missionary pressures, and boarding schools like Fort Sill, she struggled to preserve rituals, language, and family in the face of land openings. Around 1900, a young indigenous woman poses in ceremonial attire. While photographers traveled through reservations and fairs, assimilation policies imposed boarding schools that banned languages and rituals. Land allotment laws divided territories. Agents sought to standardize names and beliefs. Her gaze records a life between colonial pressure and enduring tradition. In 1898, Frank A. Reinhardt photographed Hattie Tom, Chiricahua Apache, at the Indian Congress of the Trans-Mississippi Exposition in Omaha. In the studio, she wears a leather dress with metal tinklers and bead necklaces. The scene records the presence of Apache women at an event that sought to showcase indigenous cultures to the nation at the end of the 19th century. Born in 1873, Elsie Vance Chestuin, granddaughter of Chiricahua leader Victorio, indigenous name Chestuin, was sent to Fort Marion in 1886 and later to the Carlisle Indian School. From an Apache people marked by forced removals, she died at Fort Sill in 1898 at age 26 and was buried in the Beef Creek Cemetery, Oklahoma. Her journey encapsulates the Chiricahua post-war experience. In 1886, Lizzie Longwolf, daughter of Oglala Lakota leader Longwolf, appeared in William F. Cody's Buffalo Bill's Wild West. These tours blended spectacle and propaganda, bringing indigenous peoples to the stage to reenact the West before massive audiences. Lizzie shows how the show helped shape the popular vision of the American past. In 1895, a young Hopi woman in Arizona appears with squash blossom whorls in her hair, a sign of being unmarried. She lives in villages like Oraibi on the Third Mesa. The scene shows an agricultural people connected to Kachina ceremonies during a period when photographers like A.C. Vroman were beginning to document their daily life. In 1899, Frank A. Reinhardt photographed Hattie Tom, a Chiricahua Apache woman in Omaha, at the Indian Congress of the Trans-Mississippi Exposition. Her leather dress, metal cones, and bead necklaces tell both her story and that of a changing country, an identity asserted before a colonial showcase and policies that sought to erase it at the turn of the century. In 1886, at the end of the Apache Wars, the Chiricahua surrendered and entire families became prisoners. Among them was Isabel Perico Njadi, daughter of Perico. Transferred from Fort Marion and Mount Vernon to Fort Sill, the Chiricahua remained under surveillance. Isabel lived in this captivity until 1914. Altogether, it was 27 years of imprisonment. Around 1900, Alice was on the Columbia Plateau, today Oregon and Washington. Her people may have been Cayuse, Walla Walla, or Umatilla, groups that formed the CTUR. Her features and clothing indicate a life with horses, salmon fishing, and the impacts of the 1855 treaties. The uncertainty reflects intertribal marriages and displacements at the turn of the century. In 1885, a young Comanche woman appears in Indian Territory near Fort Sill, already in the reservation era. The Numunu people, still wore leather dresses with beads, braids, and commercial wool cloth. Around them, the shrunken Comancheria shows a life between tradition and harsh federal control. Tippis and the military post mark the clash of worlds. Around 1900, a Hopi bride walks before sunrise, wrapped in white blankets woven by the men of the groom's family, a symbol of union and shared duties. Over her dark dress, a white blanket crosses her shoulders. Relatives prepare piki, a thin bread made from blue corn, marking the marriage and kinship ties on the mesas of Arizona. In 1886, Julie Nelson faces the camera without a smile, as was common. The studio required a firm pose, exposure times were still long, and Victorian etiquette discouraged smiles. Her clothing follows the fashion of the time, a fitted bodice, high collar, and a skirt with a bustle accentuating the back. The portrait signifies status in a United States becoming urbanized at the end of the 19th century. In 1893, George A. Addison photographed Amy and Carrie, young Kiowa women at Fort Sill, Oklahoma Territory. Wearing fringed shawls and carrying embroidered cradle boards, They faced the camera with the calm of those enduring harsh changes. Military schools, forced migrations, and the pressure to abandon languages and rituals. In the 1880s, already confined to the reservation in the Oklahoma Territory, Comanche women kept life going. They set up and took down teepees, tanned hides, made clothes and beadwork for trade, cared for children and elders, preserved their language and rituals, and helped adapt the community's economy to the new rules imposed by the government.